What happens when the military says your daughter died by suicide, but the autopsy report says otherwise? We're about to find out. Welcome to another episode of the True Crime Remixed, where I'm your girl, Omega Keys, along with my girls, Kathy and Kimberly Edwards. We cover vengeance, scams, murder, and strange disappearances from the Black perspective. Kathy is still filming with BET right now, but we're going to go ahead and hold her down for her for this episode. This story rocked me to my core when I first heard about it because Lavena died. When she died, I had been with the Army for less than a year. I had just switched over from the Air Force due to its culture of sexism, racism, lies, only to be right back up in the frying pan. Hearing her news was like a horror story for me coming to true life. So that's why I wanted to do this one so bad. This tragic story involves Lavena Johnson, her parents, Linda and Dr. Johnson, versus the Army. Oh, and joining us later is U.S. Army Colonel Ann Wright. Those will be our players this episode. Lavena, of course, is the victim. Lavena was born July 27th, 1985, and came from a stable family. She grew up in Florissant, Missouri. She was one of 5 children. Her father served 3 years in the Army and then went to college to earn a doctorate in psychology. Both he and his wife Linda worked civilian jobs in support of the troops for the Army. When Lavena decided to join the Army to pay for college, they were hesitant, but, supportive. Because during this time was at 04, it was kind of still close to after 9/11. People were being deployed overseas left and right during this time. And so they were hesitant, but also the dad knew the culture from his time in service. And I get it. My father retired from the Navy. So when I announced I was joining the military after college, there was a bit of hesitancy, but both of my parents were supportive. Plus, it wasn't nothing they could do about it because when I announced that I was already enlisted. She looked like her daddy and acted like her daddy. Everything, Linda told Dateline. She wanted to be just like him. However, Lavena didn't have to enlist in the Army. Her parents had the ability to pay for her education as well as that of her other siblings. Lavena's father, Dr. Johnson, was a military psychologist for his entire career, so the family was familiar with military issues. To this day, Dr. Johnson is convinced that Lavena had been indoctrinated by recruiters visiting her high school, Hazelwood Central, a mandate introduced by the No Child Left Behind Act. Let me tell you, I was also a recruiter at one point, and they were big on pushing us out in certain areas to those high schools. One of my high schools was it Warren Central? Yeah, in Indiana. And at the time, there was a majority black high school. They were pushing us out there to try to go to those schools and stuff. I probably only showed up at the high school one time. I found other ways. I wasn't comfortable with really recruiting at the high schools. Like that just wasn't my thing to be at the high schools approaching kids and stuff like that about joining the military. So I didn't fall for it. Just a note, a provision in the No Child Left Behind Act signed by President George W. Bush in 2002 sought to bolster military recruitment efforts by requiring high schools to give military recruiters private information about their schools or lose federal funding. So that is how they knew who to go after. Just so you know, if you didn't know.
I didn't know that.
And now you know. Lavena left for basic training right after high school. She went on to be stationed in Balad, Iraq, and worked in the communications building. She stayed in constant communication with her family on her experience while deployed. Oh gosh, my heart just sank because something I just realized. that my daughter-in-law is now in communications. And she is getting ready to be deployed to Poland in January. So less than a few weeks away. But it just hit me real quick right there. I'm all right though. On July 17th, Lavena called her parents with the good news that she would be coming home early for Christmas and that she was looking forward to decorating the tree and spending time with everyone. Her mother recalled her being her, her normal jubilant self during this conversation. Just days later, Lavena got off work sometime between 4 and 5 p.m., but never made it to her physical training appointment. I'm just including this next part because it was noted, but not by who. And it simply says the Army claimed that she had met up with a male soldier for about 4 hours in his room. They both went to the shopping area to pick up some items and then went their separate ways. This was the Army saying it's like, that's why she didn't show up for her physical training appointment. At 1:20 a.m., her body was found in a contractor's tent in a pool of blood with her hand covering her face. Next to her body was an M16 rifle and some scattered papers. The family received information that would rock them to their core. From the 2010 documentary, Dr. Johnson described the events of the day they were notified of Lavena's death. Beginning with that dreaded knock on the door, Dr. Johnson saw the Army sergeant and another soldier, believed to be an official and public relations officer, on his doorstep. He knew the reason for the visit immediately because he served. And if you watch any military movies, you know what them showing up at the house mean. After the initial courtesy condolences from the military men, Dr. Johnson was asked to give permission for a closed casket and to sign off on the decision. He refused. Dr. Johnson wanted to know the cause of death. In fact, he demanded to know. The military officials said the cause of death was suicide via a self-inflicted gunshot to her head. In July 2005, 19-year-old Johnson became the first female soldier from Missouri to die in Iraq. For me and Dr. Johnson, that closed casket was a red flag. I say this because the military is not above sending empty caskets back from war and saying a loved one body is in it. And then days later, months later, whatever, they end up getting the rest of the actual true body that they found and sent to them. Also, if it is suicide, why can't they see the body? At that point, Dr. Johnson suspected foul play. Lavena had showed no signs of depression or suicide. In fact, she was looking forward to seeing the family on Christmas on her break when she took leave. Because when you're deployed, sometimes you can come home for a break. You can take leave while you're overseas, just depending on what's going on. You do get leave, and a lot of times bases shut down for Christmas. So you get that furlough. Furthermore, Lavena was in charge of a communications facility and was able to phone and email from home on a daily basis just to, squelch her family fears. Dr. Johnson then asked if a rape kit and autopsy had been conducted. Again, he was told no. So Dr. Johnson demanded an open casket funeral and access to his daughter's remains for the purpose of conducting an autopsy. Immediately, her parents knew that the story of her suicide was not true.
Speaking of crazy, you know we love true crime, and guess what? We are also filmmakers. Join us for the premiere of our crime thriller, Keeping Secrets, on January 28th. You can celebrate with us by watching along on Amazon or Tubi. Once again, this is our movie. It's about a cop who has to go undercover at a strip club in order to catch a serial killer. Sound familiar? Check us out on January 28th and go ahead and leave us a review. Once again, that's Keeping Secrets, and it's our film.
Dr. Johnson, her father, and Army vet who still worked for the Army demanded to see the evidence and filed freedom of information requests and enlisted the assistance of local legislatures. He formed his own investigating team gathering family members with criminal science experience, and for years, they pored over the documents, statements, and autopsy photos. The family was able to view the body, and what they discovered was so gruesome beyond belief. Lavena's remains had been so mutilated that she was unrecognizable to the family. There was no hint of the previously bubbly teen that they knew. There are photos out there of her body, but I am not posting them. I'm not posting them. I'm not sharing them. If you want to see them, you can go to Google and find them things yourself. What comes to mind to me is Emmett Till.
My God.
Through the Freedom of Information Act, Dr. Johnson and family friends accidentally found a Xerox picture of a CD containing photos of the crime scene. The M16 that the Army alleges Lavena shot herself with was found perfectly parallel to her body inside a burning tent belonging to a KBR contractor. The mystery CD leaked to the family was to be the smoking gun in investigation. I want y'all to know a M16 is big.
Right.
I had to carry an M16. It is not a small weapon. It is not a 9mm. It's about this big. So for you to try to jimmy it around and use that as a suicide, it's kind of hard to do.
Right.
If you're using that one as your weapon and the trajectory of the weapon. And how you kill yourself and set the tent on fire.
Right. I want to know, what's the KBR contractor? Is that like a person that was on the base at the time?
It is like a civilian contractor working up on the
Okay.
base, one of those
Okay.
contractors. That's what it is.
Okay.
Just a contractor working on the base during those times. They can be from where she was stationed. They were like a citizen of
Right.
that of Iraq.
Right,
but working. An interpreter could be an interpreter, could be anything. Okay, yeah. There were acid burns on her inner thighs and genitalia. Her genital area suffered massive bruising and lacerations. Additionally, a corrosive material had been poured into her vaginal region, presumably to destroy DNA evidence of rape. One of her eyes was hanging out the socket, her nose broken, and the bullet hole to the head. And several of her teeth were knocked backwards. The photos also revealed additional massive bruises, scratch marks, and teeth imprints on her upper body. Her back and her right hand had been burned from what is thought to be a flammable liquid poured over parts of her body and lit. Military gloves had been glued to her hands, and when they were removed, Dr. Johnson found evidence of additional acid burns to her dominant hand, the one she would have had to use to pull the trigger. And he quickly realized that acid was intended to destroy any other DNA evidence. Not only was her body found fully clothed inside of a KBR contractor's tent burning, there was a trail of blood found tracking from outside the tent inside the tent. So basically, she wasn't killed there, she was dragged there.
Right.
Dr. Johnson concluded that Lavena had been assaulted, mutilated, murdered, and dressed after the attack with the fire designed to burn away any of the evidence. But yet they ruled it a suicide. Remember, this is 2005, not unlike the story that we just covered for Denisha Montgomery.
Right.
Which was 2022. In addition to the photos on the mystery CD, a KBR contractor, Kellogg, Brown, and Root, which is a civilian contractor, claimed to have heard a gunshot, went to investigate, and found the tent on fire. This witness looked inside and found Lavena's body. Through official Army investigation, documentation omitted any mention of the fire or the fact that Lavena's remains had been pulled from the fire.
Just not gonna say nothing.
No. The witness statement taken on July 19th, 2005 states, the witness names redacted, found the victim under the bench and verified there were no signs of life. Related, he saw the M16 laying across the victim's body. He didn't know what setting the weapon was on. He related everything was smoking, including parts of her body. He called for an ambulance and secured the scene.
Speaking of folks doing too much, have you watched Faded Reunion yet? Then what are you waiting for? It's the perfect blend of drama and comedy and a great way to reset from all of this true crime. So, what's it about? I'm so glad you asked. Mandy is desperate to impress at her 10-year reunion and will do whatever it takes, but so is her rival Jessica. So Mandy brings along the handsome Dr. Dante Perez as her wingman, and that's when things get crazy. And guess what? It's written and directed by yours truly. Check it out now. You can watch it on Tubi or YouTube, and the best part is free. So what are you waiting for? Go watch it now.
U.S. Army Reserve Colonel Ann Wright entered the picture to help the family. She spoke with the family in the documentary. No stranger to the military, Wright was a prominent officer who resigned from the U.S. State Department in 2003, voicing her public opposition to the Iraq War. She co-authored a landmark work among anti-war groups called Dissent: Voices of Conscience. According to statistics released by the Department of Defense itself, 1 in 3 women who join the military will be sexually assaulted or raped by men in the military. Wright explained in an article at Truthout that this statistic should be posted as a warning label situated above the doors of the military recruiting stations.
I would agree.
Yep. As that it were, assaults on women in the military begin before they are even recruited. And let me tell you something right here. Let me pull you up the harassment starting beforehand. Let me tell you, when I first switched over to the Army, I was in the Air Force, but I still had to, when I was switching over to the Army, I actually had to be recruited. I was recruited at first by someone I knew, so I was comfortable because it was someone I had actually dated at the time.
Okay.
That was helping with recruiting. So that I felt comfortable with him. But when it came time to sign paperwork, his supervisor wanted to meet me at my house and had my friend wait outside. And I'm sitting there like, mind you, I'm prior service, which I don't think the senior recruiter realized at the time.
Okay.
So when we were sitting in my kitchen, because I kept it,
Right.
you sitting in my kitchen with my dude outside, which I thought that was, like I said, very weird for him to have to sit outside. Like, why are we alone here?
Right.
I thought that was very weird. And the recruiter was like, dang, you ain't cooked nothing. You didn't do all type, whatever. I was like, dude, whatever, just sign my paperwork. And then I was letting him know, I'm prior service, all this other stuff. So his attitude kind of changed. But this same recruiter, years later, he got hit with all type of charges. He was an E7 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Within the next 2 years, he had got busted down to an E. Like, it takes a congressional for you to lose your rank as an E7. But he got dropped down to an E4 because of sexual harassment. Yeah, sexual harassment. It was a wild case. I got pulled because, of course, when they went back through and I popped up on the records.
Right.
I basically had to testify.
Like
at the military. The military brought me in, CID brought me in to talk about it. But thankfully, like I said, nothing happened to me, but it was also because I was prior service.
Right.
But I did find it very strange being prior service that, because in the Air Force, why are we alone?
And
like, why are you alone? We're not supposed to be alone like this. And when I went into recruiting years later, we were never allowed to be alone with the opposite sex. So I used to have to bring that person that brought me in.
Right.
He was still in recruiting at the time. We both, when we were talking to somebody of the opposite sex, we both just went together.
Right.
Because so can't be alone with the applicant of the opposite sex. So, but I'm just saying, like, there were some changes made after this person got in trouble. Right. But it was just that sexual harassment starts there. They start grooming you in through that. Yeah. And that's what he was doing. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there, my little quick experience, but it does happen. And I had already been in the military at that time for 6 years, so I wasn't falling for the bull.
And then I wouldn't be surprised if he goes back and tells his people about this new recruit and the people, and that's how it starts.
Yeah, I saw a E5 getting pinned on her rank in a freaking bikini one time, and I was so appalled. Like it's a lot that goes on. Anyway, we're gonna move on with this story though. Ooh. Furthermore, Wright explains in the movie, in the article, that there is a pervasive pattern of non-combat related deaths following instances of rape. Frequent military women first report rape and are later found dead of non-combat causes, and all of a sudden they're listed as suicide by these same military these women served. To add further to the family's pain, military officials kept insisting these mortal wounds were the result of suicide. Remember, eye hanging out, right? Teeth knocked back, acid burns, acid on your vagina, right? So she did all this to herself before she shot herself. Not happening. Burning off her fingerprints, basically. Ironically, the Army investigators first considered Lavena's death to be a homicide and recorded it in their paperwork, but within a short window of opportunity, they suddenly were ordered to cease their investigation and reclassify her death as a suicide. This order had to come from officers higher up in the military food chain, Wright said. Now they twisted it to say a soldier with no history of mental illness now has a history of mental illness with no facts to back it up. If this were the case, she would have been sent home. If they would have determined for real before this happened that she had any mental illness, you will not have access to that weapon, and you will be sent back for evaluation stateside. That is the truth. So they're making it up after the fact. Not only had the military covered up a crime, evidence of foul play had been tampered with or destroyed. Dr. Johnson was going to war for his baby girl against the Pentagon. The parents headed to congressional hearings in 2008, assisted by their local congresswoman, William Lacey Clay. The Johnsons were cautiously hopeful that they will finally get the truth. Congressman Clay was successful in obtaining some investigative information, but not enough to force the truth from the Pentagon's top brass. The Johnsons watched in disgust as Pentagon members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld were unable to recall certain events or memos regarding these suspicious deaths. So, while Congressman Clay gave a verbal spanking to Pentagon leaders, other Republican members of the committee were fawning over the generals, practically apologizing for the inconvenience at all. Basically, they put on a big show and downplayed everything. The family got nothing. The Army stuck to their lies and played dumb with the attitude of, how dare we be questioned? Oh, the military did have this to say. For those of you watching me, you can see this. And for those of you listening, this is my eye roll to them. Just, ugh. Investigators concluded that Lavena had shot herself in the mouth with her M16 rifle in a contractor's tent on base. The report included witness testimony suggesting that she may have been depressed over a recent breakup, according to Chris Gray. Now all of a sudden she's depressed over a breakup, but she had just talked to her family because she'd been able to communicate with them all the time.
And no one even mentioned this relationship.
Oh, no, not at all. We express our sincere condolences to the family and friends of PFC Johnson. We have and continue to take the death of PFC Lavena Johnson very seriously, Gray said. Our lengthy and very thorough investigation by highly trained specialist agents is based on fact, testimonial evidence, physical evidence, and forensic evidence. The independent autopsy found by the Armed Forces Medical Examiner came to the same conclusion. Tragically, there are many misrepresentations of the facts being circulated on the internet that are false and unsubstantiated. Yeah, like the blood dragging her into the tent, right, and her being beat up with the acid poured on her. Right. Yeah, because you do all that stuff before you commit suicide. You pour acid on your coochie.
The military needs to be ashamed of themselves.
They do. Lavena's parents dispute the Army's conclusion and believe the findings were flawed because her death was investigated as a suicide and not a homicide. They told Dateline their daughter had been happy and healthy. They said that her arms were too short, which is what I described when I was given the length of the M16. It's a very big weapon. It is bigger than my arm. Well, my forearm, not the whole length, but still it is hard. If you're going from butt to nose, that's very long. They said that her arms were too short and that she couldn't have shot herself with her rifle. They also added that the wound in her head was too small to even be made by M16, especially at close range. We know this from firing the actual weapons. So even beyond the obvious evidence of abuse, there was no sign of depression or suicidal, ideology, right, in Johnson's psychological profile. The bullet wound was in the wrong place for her to have even shot herself with her dominant hand. And the exit wound was the wrong size to have come from her own M16, as the Army suggested it did. The case remained labeled as a suicide to this day. They plucked a part of my heart, Dr. Johnson said in the 2010 documentary. I can't get it back, but I'm going to fight until I get justice for her. We're just going to keep on doing what we can do to keep her story alive. To this day, Dr. Johnson has fallen ill, and even from his hospital bed, he has let everyone that he comes in contact know about his beautiful daughter, Lavena. They have a petition to reopen the investigation on change.org. I looked and I seen that it is still active.
It is.
Yep. So, you can go to change.org/United States Army, reopen the case of Lavena Johnson if you want to, and help this family out. If you're somebody that has any information, please help this family out. If you have a change of heart and you've retired since this was 2005, right, please come forward, because this is absolutely ridiculous. It's absolutely so sad on this. And like I said, it's very reflective of what's still going on today. We have, these other soldiers in 2022, 2023, that they still don't have answers from these mysterious deaths that the Army is ruling a suicide. It's crazy. And there's so much evidence around these deaths that is obviously not suicide. Like, nobody is if you're gonna kill yourself, you're not gonna pour acid all up over your body parts to get rid of the DNA for the reasons for you killing yourself.
There's got to be one person.
Yeah, you're not
one person. You're
not gonna beat your own eye out, beat your teeth out.
No.
You're not gonna do all of this stuff to yourself and then kill yourself with a M16, even though they said that the ballistics aren't matching up. So it's like, whatever.
I pray that someone's soul gets so convicted that they have nothing else to do but tell.
Absolutely.
That their heart is so heavy that they can do nothing else but tell and come forth and help this family.
Right. That brings us to the end of the episode, but we're going to move up into thoughts. My thoughts on this, as a veteran, like I said, this messed me up when it first happened. It was like so close to home when it first happened, and it kind of had me on edge for a little bit. Like, up in my units, I would make sure that, like, I'm not being left alone. Like if I didn't really know you, I wasn't being left alone with you. And with certain people, even if I knew you, I still had a side eye on you. I wasn't like going off to eat and chill and hang and getting too comfortable with you. And now like my daughter-in-law is in the military and she's in the army, and I've had to tell her like, look, I need you to be careful. Like, don't be getting too close, too comfy, getting drunk, doing whatever around these jokes. I'm not telling you to have fun. I'm just telling you I need you to be careful because, it's some killers out there.
And obviously.
Yeah.
And the military does nothing. It's the army. The army does nothing.
Oh, don't get it twisted. All the branches have problems, but these stories just happen to be coming up out of the army right now. But remember, I said that the reason that I switched over from the Air Force to the Army was because of the issues that I had. Like I was being sexually harassed by a captain, and I was military intelligence. And I was being sexually harassed by a captain. And see, I had to walk through his office in order to get to my vault, where I worked at, like a skiff building. But I had a vault at the end that you had to have a special security clearance to get into.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to deal with this captain that sometimes like we would be the only people there because people didn't have the clearances and to get in. And like I would be at my desk working, and like sometimes he would come like right behind me, and I would feel his penis press up at like against my shoulder, trying to lean in and try to act like he's asking me something, and them subtle rubs, and it was just so
gross.
It was so gross, and it was so uncomfortable. And because the other thing was like he was white, and I knew that, he was a captain. I was at that time, At that time, I was a sergeant.
Shame on the military.
It was like that with a. No, excuse me. I wasn't a sergeant. I was an airman at that time, and so I did put in a complaint.
Right.
Because I couldn't I was getting like sick, and like I didn't want to show up for work. I didn't want to because I'm going in there and I know this man's gonna put his dick on me. I mean, that's the reality. He was pressing up on me, running, trying to make suggestive remarks, trying to get me to drink while on duty. It was all type of shit that was going on. And I knew like I had to be absolutely perfect because I didn't have any leeway to mess up anywhere. Like it was a lot going on. He would undermine me when I had to do briefings. He would undermine me and whatever. And so basically I made a complaint. I got moved. And I got moved. Thankfully.
Yes.
I got moved, but I was in a worse situation when I got moved because then I got stuck up under the most racist command ever. That warrant officer, Chief Matthews, that man hated the sight of me for being too smart. Thankfully, my road dog Dean Johnson, Master Sergeant Johnson, had my back a lot with that. But like I said, it was like out of the frying pan into the fire. And of course, at this point, I can't make another complaint. Because I'd already made a complaint. But I'm telling you, I was going through all type of stuff like there. Like everything I did was undermined. It was hard for me, and it was hell for me. That bastard took me off of active duty orders, put me on reserve orders because how dare you? He got my pay cut, and I was stationed at Wright-Patterson. So imagine me in active duty and reporting to your unit, and then all of a sudden, no, you don't belong here. You're reserve. You're supposed to be on the reserve side. What?
And then the reserve side is less than what you.
Yeah, the reserve side was 1 weekend out the month.
Oh yeah, the reserve.
The reserve side was one. I mean, they did have some active people there, but it was a whole different house. It wasn't even on the same side of the base.
So this dude took you from regular military
active duty service and got me put on
duty pay
rest, took all my benefits away to me being stuck on the reserve side, but he was still in charge.
Shame on
and
the
so
military.
I found my outlet. I found my escape by switching over to the Army. to get up out of there to get those active duty orders back. Like, because I
Right.
couldn't, like, what am I gonna do? I had kids to feed. Like, it was a lot going on.
Shame on the military.
Yeah.
For
So
allowing such shenanigans to happen, and
Yeah.
shame on everyone who knows and doesn't say anything, because silence is complacency. Like, you're just as guilty.
yeah. So when I got switched over, I ended up in a real good unit. Then I was very happy when I switched over to the Army. I was very, very, very happy. I ended up with some great people. My first experience in the Army, I ended up with some great people, some very, very great,
Right.
some great people that I would consider, like, you know, to this day. Like,
Right.
yeah, I ended up in a great position, you know, thankfully. But when the situation happened with Lavena, you know, it's like, oh shit, this is happening in the Army too.
Yeah.
You know, that all that came. And so it kind of puts you on panic mode and high alert mode. And, you know, it kind of messes with you a lot, because now you're always scared that something can happen to you, because then I got moved away from that unit that where I was comfortable
Right.
to other units, you know, along the way. And it was just a mess. And I have had some janky command there. One thing about the military, you can be smart, but you can't be too smart. That's a problem. That's absolutely a problem. So it's a lot that goes on. Anyway, what's your thoughts on this?
Shame on the military.
That's it.
Yeah. Shame on the military.
Yeah.
And shame on them, because they know. What'd she say that? What was Ann Wright? That's her name?
Colonel Ann Wright.
Colonel Ann Wright. Above the doors.
Put those signs.
Put those signs up.
Mm-hmm.
Put those signs up above the door. And women, you beware.
Yeah,
be wise.
Yeah, I'm not saying don't join the military, because I had a lot of great times there. I'm not saying don't join, but I'm just saying be aware. But I mean, you know, stuff like this can happen anywhere, because we've covered plenty of serial killers. So crazy stuff can happen everywhere. It's not just the military. So you can't be like, oh, don't join the military because this won't happen, because it happens everywhere. But we're just saying be aware.
Be aware.
So that is our episode on PFC Lavena Johnson. Make sure you follow us on IG, Twitter, Facebook at the True Crime Remix and True Crime Remix Podcast. And also TikTok. Yes. We do our little quickies there too. For that, you know, you can watch or listen to us on Anchor, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, leave us reviews, leave us comments. You can support us on Anchor, and you can also leave us a voice message if you want to chit chat with us. And when we start getting some, we will play them back. You know, some of the messages be heard live, you know, telling us what you think about the podcast or some of these killers out here that we're talking about. That would be great.
Right.
Gosh. This has been another episode of the True Crime Remix with your host, Omega Keys, and my girls, Kathy Taylor, who is chilling with BET, working today, and Kimberly Edwards. Until next time, peace, love, soul, and hair grease.